motivation, inspiration, determination. Are you ready to jump into a new business idea? Are you ready to jump into a better life? Welcome to our program, Joining Jump Into It, a podcast and live show to help entrepreneurial-minded women jump into a better life. Welcome. I'm your host, Gabriella Hellman, an entrepreneur, author, and marketer. I've had the opportunity of helping over hundreds of businesses establish themselves online and grow successfully. And along with me is my co-host, Anita, an accomplished marketing executive, a two-time author, and spiritual activist. We have a very interesting and powerful, important topic to talk about today, and that is how to build successful partnerships for our businesses. And this is something that it is really critical to every business. So we're very excited to have with us to discuss this topic, Martha Fell. She's a co-founder and president of Jaxx Marbles, entrepreneur, mentor, community builder, and is recognized as one of the top 100 most powerful women by WXN, Women's Executive Network. Ida, before we begin and introduce our very exciting guest, as a marketing executive, can you share your thoughts on the importance of business partnerships in order to be successful?
Yes, thank you. And hello, everyone who's joined us this evening. I'm so excited to be here again this week and looking forward to bringing on our special guest. But when I think about building partnerships and what that might look like, a couple of things come to mind. And shared values is something that I think would be important for consideration when you're looking to bring a business partner in. And that's cultural fit, alignment of your values. That's a great place to start. Also defining roles, laying out what the parameters of the relationship are going to look like as part of your working relationship. Clear communication is really paramount because you have to keep the channels open to establish that, that openness and to also start building trust along the way. So those are just the top things that I think about that builds a successful partnership. But I know our guest will have some additional insights. So why don't we introduce Miss Martha to the show?
Thank you, Anita. I'm very excited to have Martha. Martha, thank you so much for being our guest. And why don't we start first, you sharing with our listeners a little bit about yourself and your business and what inspired your journey to become an entrepreneur.
First of all, thank you both. I'm really excited to be part of Jump Into It. Jump Into It. And I'm going to jump into it. So okay. I don't think I knew early on in my career really what defined entrepreneurship, except the classic definition of creating something, going for it, and making it happen, and usually in the form of a new business. But as I look back, I would say my story is so far, it's about 4 chapters long. And each of my chapters, as I reflect on it, probably have aspects of entrepreneurship in each one of them in very unique ways. I would say that my first chapter was when I was really learning, and learning is a big part of entrepreneurship because you're often doing something that is brand new. It's innovative, it's creative, it's taking a lot of risk, and it's leaning on a lot of people. And so my first chapter was, ironically enough, in finance, not where you would expect to find too many entrepreneurs. And I was learning at a bank everything there was to know about bonds. And when that first chapter concluded, my second chapter really was not too far away from it, but it wasn't in the field of capital markets. It was actually in advocacy and advocating for women in capital markets, and where I had the opportunity to be their first CEO. And I took the role on with, I would say, a fair number of tools in my toolbox, but I was still learning. And I was learning a lot about how to advocate and how to be a leader and how to lead an initiative. And it was those leadership skills that took me to the next chapter. And the next chapter is one it's still an open chapter. I'm parsing 2 chapters right now. One is in true entrepreneurship, and the other is on boards. And what you learn about business, what you learn about your, as Anita mentioned, your values and your communication skills, you can adapt a lot of those learnings into a strong leadership style. And that often is what it takes to be a leader or a strong contributor to a board, which is where I spend a good portion of my time right now. My 4th chapter really is what is the newest and most creative and certainly the most entrepreneurial thing I've ever done, which is Jaxx Marbles. And when I look back, there are aspects of what I did early on that have nothing to do with what I'm doing right now. And I'm sure if I talked to my younger self, I would scratch my head saying, you're going to do what in your what ages? So I've had a lot of fun. It's been a great journey so far.
Excellent. And can you tell a little bit about the type of business Jaxx Marbles is?
Yep. So my co-founder and I started this partnership not almost 10 years ago. We were incorporated 9 years ago. And we came up with a way to launch what we called our sort of, not quite stay at home, but we wanted, I think, what some people refer to as a side hustle. Believe me, it's not a side hustle. It's a little more than that. But it's a way of creating value with skills that you have and building a brand, building a business, and having fun. So we took an idea and we produced it and we sold it. We were starting off with one product line, and within a year, we realized that product line didn't have as much longevity as we'd hoped, and certainly didn't have the margins that we wanted. So we shifted gears and we came up with something entirely different, which has been pretty much the bulk of the last 9 years of our work. And we take vintage maps and we print them on products and we sell them to stores. We sell them to customers online. We do custom work now. It's probably 50% of our work right now is custom work with clubs and schools and camps and organizations and people and cottage associations. So we work across Canada, and we have pivoted several times now. We pivoted right away from one product to another. May 2020, we pivoted from retail to B2B, and we sold everything through small cottage stores across Ontario. And about a year ago, we pivoted for the 3rd time, and we now are 50% of our business is custom.
Oh, very interesting.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
That's fun.
Yeah, but as a entrepreneur, you're always having to be open-minded to pivoting and go where the market is, go where the opportunities are, and and I think that's what helps your longevity, at least what I found as well. And in that pivoting and that evolving and that continuously redefining your business, how did partnerships play into that?
Well, partnerships are critical. I would say, even going back to the first chapter I referred to, where I was at a bank learning everything there was to do about bonds, I became a manager really early in my career, and I was petrified. I thought, oh my God, I'm way too young to be managing a group of people. I suffered horrible, sorry, word blank, imposter. And I couldn't believe I was where I was, but I realized, and I defined leadership for myself very quickly. I said, I'm not a work for person. I found that intimidating, and I didn't want to be intimidating. I felt intimidated by referring to myself that way. So I quickly said, I'm not a work for, I'm a work with. And I believe that actually is the definition of partnership. It's working with someone. Yeah. So partnership for me is everything. It's learning about yourself. It's learning, what do you do well? What do you like to do? And therefore, what don't you do well, and what don't you like to do? And the best way to partner in order to achieve your goals is to find the person that fills the gaps. That's partnership.
That's absolutely right. I think just a couple thoughts around what you said, with the word you couldn't get to, which was that imposter syndrome. I find that interesting because I think that's something that most women do face, that they feel that when they're in a certain role, whether that's the entrepreneurial role, a mother role, your corporate role, you name it, the different hats we wear, we sometimes just don't believe that we don't have that confidence in ourselves. And I think we all suffer from that imposter syndrome. And so the fact that you redefined what that meant for yourself and in your partnerships, I think is a very interesting statement. Could you also share with us what you felt was, your most rewarding partnerships and what that looked like?
Yes. So there's two elements of rewarding partnerships. One is, I suppose, the most obvious one, which is where it's commercially beneficial. So you find someone who, has something that you need and you benefit from it commercially, or there's a mutual exchange that is commercially beneficial to your business. It allows you to grow. It allows you to build new parts of your business. It allows you to innovate. And then I think there's another part of partnership that's really important, which is a little less defined as commercial, because it's more of just a sharing of ideas. And oftentimes it's not the obvious part of your network. It's not, your go-to suppliers or your go-to clients. Sometimes it's a mentor or a sponsor, or strangely enough, sometimes it's a competitor who might see the opportunity to share best practices around tackling certain parts of the business. So whether it was, early on in my career at a bank or most recently in Jaxx Marbles, there's definitely times when I found myself needing information and wanting to find the right partner that didn't necessarily have anything that I could offer them. And that's the other thing about partnership, is that most people believe that it's a two-way street and it's a win-win. And so you partner together because you each have something to gain by it. And that's not always the case. But partnership and mutual benefit doesn't happen always simultaneously. Sometimes you do something that, as I say, pays it forward. I'll scratch your back today because a year from now I might be calling you asking for a favor, or you take up the charge on something that is perhaps with a not-for-profit agency or involves a volunteer or a mentoring opportunity where it tends to be one-directional. But again, I go back to, strategic networking does teach us that it isn't always have to be an even exchange at one time. You pay it forward, and sometimes partnerships are maybe one-directional right away, but they pay off over time.
But really good point, because it's not always immediate gratification. And, but I do, somewhere along the line, there is a reciprocity. I think by human nature, if I buy the baseball tickets to go see, you're more likely to lean on me and say, hey, I'll do business with you or build a partnership. And I think that some of the values of like so many relationships are on some level of partnership. Marriages are partnerships, friendships have a certain level of partnerships. And so how do you weigh in trust and respect when it comes to partnerships? Are they the critical element, or this reciprocity that I'll get something from it? Maybe it's not immediate, but somewhere down the road.
I would say trust and rest. It's interesting you bring that up, because I probably, in all my pages of notes in preparation, didn't even consider it, because to me, that's the starting point. If you don't have trust or respect for the individual with which you're going to partner, why are you wasting your time?
Yeah, true. And sometimes,
and having said that, in fairness, Gabriella, it's also potentially someone. So there's an interesting part of, so has everyone read Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point?
A long time ago.
whether you have or not.
Yeah.
It struck a chord with me, and I became the biggest Malcolm Gladwell fan. I wanted to go to anything he was talking at, because I immediately grabbed the tipping point and read the first couple of chapters and went, oh my God, I'm a connector. Someone's defined me. I'm a connector. And then I read a little further and I'm like, oh, but maybe I'm a salesman or saleswoman. And then I read on and I realized that he actually said, it's okay, most people are too. I'm like, oh, phew, okay, well, there I am. I'm a connector and I'm a salesman. But when I dove into the book, I started to appreciate some of the aspects of, what defines a connector and what defines a salesperson. And I realized it's not so much that a connector knows a lot of people and connects on a very, constant social level and is considered sort of the link. And it's not so much the link within a network, but it's linking networks together. That is some of the essence of being a connector, a good connector. And I thrive. I love connecting people. I want someone to say, Martha, do you know who I should talk to about this? Because I'm like, oh, yes. I have a ton of people in my Rolodex. Oh, wow. My kids are like, Mom, you can't say Rolodex anymore. I'm like, okay, fine. In my contact list. But that's it. The thing about a connector is they have no problem reaching way out into their like, oh, I haven't talked to them in 10 years, but I'm going to call them up because I just saw on LinkedIn that they're now doing this. And I wonder if they've got some thoughts on this. And so you might have historical trust, or you might have a really long distance relationship with someone that is, you haven't talked to in a long time, or cross paths in a different chapter of your career, but that doesn't mean you can't reach out to them again. So trust and respect can have longevity. Now, that brings me to the next point. You can also lose people's trust and lose people's respect. You can have lose trust and respect for someone.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
It is a fine line, but for me, it's where it's a starting point.
And one interesting thing you brought up is the connectors. And when you want to build a partnership or you want to find the right partner, hooking up with a connector to help you find the right partner can help maybe accelerate the connections that could happen, accelerate the broadening of your network, with knowing the key importance a connector can play in finding those right partnerships or those right relationships.
I agree.
Well, I think the both of you are saying something around network. I think it's important to sort of reiterate. Yeah. And that is the power of your network. Excuse me. Whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's your work network, we tend to sometimes, and I think about it when you're looking for a job and you sometimes are a bit apprehensive about going out to your network and saying, "Whoa, can you help me?" But your network is your number one most powerful way to advance where your cause, whatever that is, whether it's the job, whether it's finding a new graphic designer.
So the point is that we really lean on our network, and people I think are apprehensive too, because there's a pride or their ego is that or feelings of rejection, or I just some reasons why, but our network really is our ability to and it's, as you said, it's a reciprocity. Your network is as strong as your ability to give into your network, as well as not just take. So it's not always a one-way street. And it's interesting because you could look at networks as partnerships.
Mm-hmm. I do.
Right. Yeah. And I've never thought of it that way, but it is. It's a series of partnerships. It could be, one to many or one to one. The partnerships, like our network is, I give you something of worth out there, and then you reciprocate by either sharing it or following or adding comments to it. So that the social media has kind of redefined or expanded the definition of partnership. and relationship.
Yeah, so I have an interesting take on our topic overall, because we were talking about partnerships in the headline of this event.
Right.
And my knee-jerk reaction is always, well, partnerships to me are my network, because I see everyone in my network as a partner. They may not be my day-to-day partner. They may not be my, a partner that I call on once a week. It might be someone I call on once a month or even once a year or when I need them. The other part about networking that I think is important to consider is that networking has to be done strategically. So our network in the professional world, some people might define as all the people on their LinkedIn. They might define their network as everybody in their office. And, as young as high school kids, I have coached them to say, it's everyone at your camp or at your class or at your school or on your sports team or in your family or on your street. That's actually where you start your network. And you build from there. And if you think about, going back to what defines a good partnership, if it is the people in your life or in your network who can help fill your gaps, then the more you build your network, the easier it is to fill them. I mean, nobody likes to do anything alone. That's the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur, is that you're out there and you're standing alone trying to figure it all out. And there are days when you wake up going, I'm trying to boil the ocean. Holy smokes, how am I going to do all this? And it's often those times when you finally have to sit down, take a deep breath and go, I can't do this alone. In fact, when I started Jaxx Marbles with Stephanie, it's because we both knew we did not want to start a company alone ever. It's too hard. So there are a lot of entrepreneurs who've been extremely successful without a co-founder, but that doesn't mean they don't have strong partnerships. My guess is they're all armed with very strong partners, maybe not in title, but in every other respect. And networking, as I started to say, has to be strategic. So at different stages of your career, your partnership or the need for a partner could be fulfilled through your network, but networking itself as an action has to be strategic. So let's take the example Gabriella just gave around, when you're looking for a job, you want to look through your network to, all right, who is in the departments of the jobs where I might see myself working, who works at the companies where I could see myself working, and who is a second or a third connection to one of those people if there aren't any direct connections in my network. And so when you think about who those people are, the act of networking means actually figuring out, am I going to reach out to them? Am I going to run into them at an event? Am I going to volunteer on a committee where they are already involved? So I have an opportunity to connect with them. It's not just networking, it's actually connecting with them. So for example, when people are starting out, post-school, trying to get a job, I often would counsel, particularly young women coming into the capital markets, go to events, go to those events beyond just the obvious, career hosted events by some of the employers. Look for ways to strategically strike up conversations with people who you believe in the room could have influence over an opportunity for you. So it might be defining the 3 people at a particular, let's say, conference or informational event or even a charity event. 3 people you're going to be there. Write down their names. Make sure you know what they look like. Have, in the old days, 3 business cards in your pocket. But you would go in looking for those people and you will have scripted yourself. What are you going to say to them if you see them at the event? And then the last one, which is the hardest, is how are you going to make a meaningful connection with them that gives you the opportunity to follow up and for them to actually be ready to receive the follow-up and go, oh, I remember meeting Martha. Yeah. She was the young, committee member on the breast cancer society, walk for whatever. Like you have to be very strategic. And it's not, you're not trying to be Machiavellian in trying to worm your way into something. That's just how it works. The other part about networking is a little more gender-based. And this is tricky because, you know, it's well within the realm of women's advocacy where a lot of people recognize that women have a harder time networking casually, particularly in male-dominated environments, than men do. But the other part of it is something that a lot of people are not aware of. And a lot of women are sometimes less aware of unless they've read, you know, I've probably got half a dozen books that I would love to flash right now in front, but I won't take the time. Men network tending to see a commercially viable opportunity. And they network with commercial mindedness.
Mm-hmm.
And they do it effortlessly. But women don't necessarily want to commercialize their relationships right away. It's almost as if we sometimes feel uncomfortable saying, well, if you do this for me and I'll do that for you, it'll both be a win-win and we'll both get ahead. It doesn't come that easily to us. And this is not just me saying this, and it's not just feminism. This is scientifically suggested. But there are lots of ways that we can get around some of those inhibitors or those barriers to networking strategically that do become comfortable. When we think about, you know, if I am the CEO of my own career and I actually want to have an action plan to achieve my goals, it might mean doing things that are a growth area for me.
Well,
so how do you, this is really great insight here on the strategic networking that I wasn't even aware of. So how do women get around that barrier of not jumping to commercializing that relationship? How do they work around being authentic who they are, but knowing that the ultimate goal is still to commercialize the relationship?
So there's three things there. One is, I think all women are pretty authentic to a fault. I think most women I've encountered are authentic. And you know, the world of media loves to come up with buzzwords for all of us. And while I appreciate there's been an emphasis on it, I think most women I've met in my career have been pretty darn authentic. What I see in that, though, is that there are those who are very comfortable as, let's go back to Malcolm Gladwell's archetypes, as the connector or as the salesman. And so if you're a natural born salesperson, you have no problem usually going into a room and, you know, selling your skills, your attributes, your connections, your experiences, your ideas, your influence. If you're a maven, you're the creator of the idea, you may not be the best salesperson for your idea. The connector wants to take the maven's ideas and connect it to someone who's going to make use of it. And the salesperson's going to go out there and sell it. So I think it's trying to find our way through our own, it's self-reflection. It's learning about ourselves, and it's overcoming some of those internal barriers. Actually, it goes back to imposter syndrome. And actually, Anita, I laugh at the fact that was where I was grasping for the words, because I actually gave a talk a year and a half ago on that very subject. And a lot of women face imposter syndrome at every stage of their career. Mm-hmm. Even if you think you've overcome it, most women still experience imposter syndrome multiple times in their career. Even if at the one time that they first had it, they thought, oh, I know what this is. I got to get over it and move on. It's hard. But commercializing is difficult for women because women don't like to ask. That's another thing. It's a great book, actually.
And often, Martha, it's others and probably your partners. And
you can't see
we can't see it, Martha.
Sorry.
Often it's others who actually see more in you than you see in yourself. Mm-hmm. It's the work colleague or the friend that is saying to you, no, you got this, you've got the skills. Like so you also look to your network to reinforce and validate who who you are and who you want to become, I think, as well. So I think that piece is important. And I just wanted to also add where you might go to find these connections and or these partners that might help in your bigger endeavors. And you talked a little bit about finding other women or other maybe like-minded people like yourself. And as we know, and you're part of Women in Capital Markets, and I'm part of Women in Payments, and we're all part of a women's association, likely. Or and if you're not part of an association or a group, there's there's the LinkedIn groups, there's the Facebook groups. And so I might add there that if you're looking as an entrepreneur, as a women entrepreneur, you should be looking at those types of associations and groups that you're with, those like-minded people, because those are the people that you're going to partner with potentially, or that might help connect you to somebody else, and help further your mission.
Yeah, very good points. And I would add that in partnerships, it's kind of depending on the level of investment or the exchange or the agreement, is that don't jump too quickly into a partnership. Get to know that partner, get to know that person, because they can present themselves as one thing, and then you uncover that they are something else. So at least, I'm just, speaking from my personal experience where in time you get wiser and being able to evaluate people and what they say they're good at. But it does take time to work with somebody to identify their strengths and weaknesses. It's not, to me, always so obvious. And it may take 3 months, it may take 6 months. It's there's this saying, slow to hire, quick to fire. Well, I think that in partnerships, we should also be looking at as well, is that don't quickly jump into it. Just like, you don't jump into a marriage without at least dating that person. Or if it's going to be a contractual partnership, that you do your legwork, you do the references, you lean towards your network to find out more about their capabilities. Maybe you take on smaller projects before you go to heavy into bigger investments. But always knowing that they're, especially when there's money to be had here, or your brand or your reputation is going to be tied into that partnership. It's really doing the due diligence in order to make sure that partnership's going to be beneficial to you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we've talked so broadly about the term partnership. We've kind of gone down a few different tangents or versions of it. Yeah. But if I look back at, particularly my partnership with my co-founder of Jaxx Marbles, I think what draws most partners like us together is knowing your skill set, knowing your level of interest, and knowing what you like to do helps you define what you don't know how to do, what you haven't experienced, and what you don't like to do. So if you know your gaps, then you know how to define what you're looking for in a partner. And I do think that, a lot of partners, if they start small and have those honest conversations, and even as Anita sort of highlighted at the beginning, if you establish it, you've got the same values, and you know that your roles are going to work well together because there's enough commonality in your skills and there's a bit of overlap, and yet you each have something new and different to bring to the table, then you're able to define those roles a little more easily than if you both came to the table with the same ideas and the same skill set and wanting to do it all together. That's impossible, or at least I don't think I would thrive, or nor would Jaxx Marbles have thrived, if we didn't each come to the table with something completely unique. She had a background in PR. I've never done PR. I'm finance and operations. That's not her bailiwick. we're both creative. She's brilliant at coming up with products and design and has a gift for the aesthetic. So that's not my bailiwick. And I respect her for that. And I trust her for that. And in the same regard, it goes both ways. We both have something to gain for it. But if I take that same template and I look at all the other ways we've defined partnership, whether it was, you know, a project that I ran back in CIBC when the intranet, long before the internet existed, we actually were writing code to communicate amongst our offices with our clients through an intranet system. So it was within the company only.
Right.
And I had clients across the country that I had to communicate with every morning within 5 minutes. And believe it or not, and there'll be some listeners who are going to laugh, we used a fax machine. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And this is where the, you know, entrepreneurial spirit came out in me going, well, I got to fix this. And I sat up one night and figured out, kind of weirdly, how to write code. There was something in the way that codes were written for the intranet that you could view how it was written and you could see the design of it. So I took a sketch to the tech team and I said, does this work? And they laughed at me and they're like, where'd you get this? And I said, I wrote it. And they laughed at me, but we worked as partners. And I said, look, I have an idea. I know where I want to go. I don't have the skills, but I've taken an attempt. They had respect for the fact that I tried, even though I got 50% of it wrong. I got 50% of it right. And we worked together and we actually wrote the code for the very first intranet page that went across the country and distributed information, and no one had ever done it before. That was not my bailiwick. That was not my expertise, but it was a desire to learn and grow. And I wasn't going to let my lack of skills preventing me from moving forward. So I look at partnership and identifying your gaps, but respecting that you're trying to get to the same place. You work together. And I didn't know that team very well, and they didn't know me, and they could have thought I was nuts for even trying to write code, but it worked. So that definition of partnership and figuring out you all want to get to the same place and you have skills that you need to bring together to make it happen is what I think is the simplest form of a successful partnership.
That's a great example. That's a great example. Because how many times, right? Anita, you would say something.
Well, I was just thinking, you know, we're talking about successful partnerships, but I wondered if you could share some thoughts around what happens when a partnership isn't going as well as you want it to. And can you share any challenges that, you know, as somebody who's dealing with, I'm sure a lot of different vendors, and I see vendors as partners, like when to your point, you didn't know how to do something, you needed to get somewhere, you contact somebody, you know, who has the skill set. But what happens when maybe it goes south and it's not going the way you want, and maybe your values aren't continuing to align, or you find out that there's been some issues that weren't brought to your attention? What are some thoughts there, Martha, that as an entrepreneur, how do you handle those situations, those conversations?
Yeah, and I think, you know, every successful career person has a litany of failed partnerships and stories, and more importantly, learnings that got them to where they are today. I doubt anyone's going to stand on the top of whatever their achievements are and say, I got here on all successful everything. No, I don't believe that. So yes, here from my little story, my 4 chapters, I would say 2 things come to mind that define how I would handle a failed partnership and what I've learned at least works for me. And the first of which we haven't really talked about right up until now, is communication is critical. If you don't start with a really clear set of understandings and goals and mutually agreed upon set of targets, measurable targets, and an alignment of your I mean, going back to the topic of values, you have to talk about that early on. And you have to remind yourself probably pretty regularly where you started and check back. Are we still targeting this? Do we still believe in this? I mean, I look back at where we started Jaxx Marbles, and as I sort of alluded to at the beginning of the podcast, we started with a completely different product. And a number of times people have asked me, where did the term Jaxx Marbles come from? Where did that name come from? Like, what the heck is that? And so I tell the story by saying, you know, we were value driven from the very beginning. We were two moms. My business partner, co-founder has two boys and I have two girls, and they were pretty young. And yeah, I mean, the kids were at an age where they were on a lot of screens, and we wanted to develop a product that was kid friendly. And so we started brainstorming. You know, you start playing around with words, and she and I chatted about, you know, it's about kids. It's about kids playing kind of like our grandfathers did, you know, away from screens and out of the house in the backyard, you know, in the sandbox, playing games like Jaxx Marbles. And we stopped and we went, oh my God, that's our name. That's got such great ring. It kind of is, you know, draws a melancholy or a kind of a vintage feel to it. And that was the kind of the cornerstone for us of both, obviously, our brand, but it was rooted in those values. Now, ironically enough, we switched products within 2 years, and we decided not to change the name because we still believe in that vintage sense. We still believe in, as we say it now, you know, we're a map-driven company, and maps are our passion. The world is your oyster. Maps are our passion. Love where you live. That's one of our taglines. And we believe in that so much that we focus almost exclusively on historical maps, because we believe that most people want to cherish the land, the geography of what it used to look like. And we focus on cottage country because everybody there loves nature. Everybody loves what it used to look like. And they kind of love that historical reflection. And that comes back to our values. So we remind ourselves fairly regularly, almost to a fault. You know, one of us goes off on a tangent. Wow, let's try this product. And it's like, wait a second. This doesn't connect with us. This isn't what we're about. So you do have to reflect on your values, but you also have to communicate. And communication is also the other critical part of learning how to watch for those times when you might see a few cracks in the relationship. And so I think communicating early and communicating clearly is really, really key, because you will uncover it. And then, of course, the last one is learn from your mistakes. Don't stay stuck. You know, as someone said, sadly, it's better to come from a broken marriage than to live in a broken marriage. So you're better to just cut the line and move on, because you can't stay in a bad situation forever and expect it to get better.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So as we're wrapping up here, as a woman entrepreneur, what would be to share with our listeners some advice you would give, particularly for aspiring female entrepreneurs?
It's my favorite question. I could talk for an hour on this alone. So, I have so much to say, and it's pretty hard to break it down, but I would say there's 3 things around achieving someone's goals or living the most fulfilling life that I would suggest they consider. One is, and I hate to bring back an old line, but there's no such thing as balance. I don't see women in particular achieving it in what is rooted as sort of the common social philosophy of what is balance, because I think it's individual choices. And each woman needs to define for themselves what their choices are. And that will allow you, if you've defined them almost as goals, and you've taken a very business-like approach. As I said before, like, you are the CEO of your own life. So set your goals, create your strategy, figure out your targets, and then create the action items to meet them, and then measure along the way. And don't be afraid to stop and say, yeah, I got to be flexible here. This isn't working. This is not panning out the way I thought. Reevaluate when you need to. So be easy on yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. Don't define it in your 20s and then wake up in your 30s and go, oh my God, I'm not there. That's not fulfilling, and that's not being flexible. And we have to be flexible, because guess what? The world turns at a breakneck speed, and none of us would have guessed that the world would be where it is today on any level at the beginning of our career. So we have no choice. I mean, pivoting is part of what we do now. And the easier you can do that and accept the need to do it, the easier it will be to achieve it. So now that leaves me the second thing: no regrets. You cannot live looking in the rearview mirror. You cannot look back and go, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Ah, damn, why didn't I take that job? Why didn't I talk to that person at the conference? Because that would have led to something better than what I've got. You can't change the past, so stop trying to. Don't regret what you didn't do. Just look forward, take one step at a time, and figure out whatever it is that's harboring guilt or reflection, and learn from it and apply it in a forward-looking way. Plan your future. Don't live with regret for the past. And of course, the last thing is look for every opportunity to connect with people. Build your network. You can learn to be a connector. It's not hard. You don't have to be the perfect extrovert. You don't have to be the loudest person at the party, or, the most, ardent speaker at a conference. You can have influence, and you can connect with people in small ways. And if you do it every day, over time, like a habit, it kind of builds from there. But don't be afraid of connecting with people just because you think you have nothing to give them. You might one day. Don't forget, most of us live, particularly in a world full of that emphasis on mentors and sponsors, thinking that that's just a one-way street, because it's not. I've mentored tons of people, and I've been mentored. It's not just about getting someone's advice. It's about that opportunity to exchange, and you learn from the people you mentor. And by the way, there's nothing better than getting a phone call saying, I'd love your advice on something, because it means you've got respect from someone. That's enough. Or they believe in you, and they believe in your experience, and they want to learn from it, which means you have an opportunity to teach. Isn't that a great way of learning and growing and feeling good about it? I would say that's fulfillment. The last I'm going to leave you with is one of the quotes that I used to give to young women during different phases of my career, which is, consider yourself someone who can inspire others to aspire to great things, but you yourself can aspire to inspire others.
Very thoughtful, Martha. Very thoughtful.
Thank you. I think that's a podcast in itself.
Yeah. I do. There's a lot
amazing.
To say on that.
Thank you, Martha.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
Before we leave the audience tonight, I don't see any questions yet, but how would everyone get in touch with you if they want to know more about Jaxx Marbles? Can you share your URL and that way they can go check you out?
Yeah, I don't know whether you want to put that in the podcast, but they can find me on LinkedIn, and Jaxx Marbles is JAXX and marbles.com.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So great. Next week, we have another fabulous guest. So thank you first, Martha, for joining us. Your wisdom and your knowledge has just been amazing. And I've certainly learned and grew a lot from just hearing what you had to say. And it's really nice to hear the voice of someone that has done the success that you've done or achieved in networking and building those communities and holding those positions. And I appreciate very much you attending and being our guest today.
Thank you very, very much for having me. I really appreciated the opportunity.
Thank you. So for next week, we have another fabulous guest whose journey is sure to inspire you. To learn more, join our Facebook group, Jump Into It, Instagram and YouTube channel. You can also listen to us on JUMPin Podcast on your favorite platform. We are on Spotify, Apple TV, iHeartRadio, to name a few. With the courage and knowledge to bring ideas to life, be ready to jump into it. Thank you for listening.
Get ready to jump into it.